The year is 2025. Income inequality is at an all-time high, the planet is heating up at an alarming rate, fascism is on Western civilization's doorstep, and for the past couple of months, I've woken up every single day with one question on my mind. How the f*** did we get here? And before you ask, no, this isn't one of those videos recapping The Big Short and explaining what a subprime mortgage is. Everyone's heard that story, and I want to tell a new one you may not have heard until now. Hey, it's been a minute, and today we're going to try to find the exact moment in time that led us to right now. I hope everyone brought their flux capacitors because we're going back in time to...
Iraq war's going better, many Iraqis still smolder.
Voters have chosen our first African-American president.
iPhone 3G.
Oh man, 2008 feels so nice. I can go bowling on Wii Sports. Hey look, YouTube's not polluted with cancerous alt-right content and AI Jesus.
We're going to Candy Mountain.
We even elected a president who has above a 5th grade reading level.
Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
Well, perhaps you'd like to say what that very important paragraph...
Yeah, so...
If you're like me, you kind of miss 2008. Making my way through adolescence in 2008 actually felt pretty prosperous. I think a lot of people around my age feel that way. We remember it as a time before the rise of smartphones, when the world just felt a little smaller, a little simpler, and a little safer. But I also think that our parents remember 2008 a bit differently, because while we were kids, locked away in our bedrooms, blasting the Black Eyed Peas, they were the grown-ups, saddled with adulthood responsibilities like childcare, bills, taxes, and, oh yeah, mortgages. And if you had a mortgage in 2008, there's really only one thing that you associate it with.
Yahoo down 8.5%.
The most serious recession in decades. It was the worst day on Wall Street since the crash of 1987.
The effects of the '08 crisis were devastating. Tidal waves of home foreclosures, people's lifetime retirements up in smoke, 1 in 10 Americans left unemployed. Our parents' generation was traumatized, and rightly so. The American dream had been sold to them over the course of a lifetime, yet for so many, it had evaporated in a matter of months.
Just a little tired of the American dream.
But in this video, I want to make the argument that it wasn't just the financial crisis itself that led to political chaos, corporate capture, and general idiocracy that plagues our nation in 2025. You see, '08 was no accident. People saw this coming. Take a look at this Money Week cover article from 2006. The danger of derivatives. The exact issue that caused the '08 crisis. You're telling me journalists at a mid-sized financial magazine had more insider info than the top executives at Goldman, Morgan Stanley, and Lehman? And yet, no bank executives ever went to prison. Most of these banks are still around today, reaping in record profits. Our government's response to the crisis, specifically its callous refusal to hold the wealthy and powerful accountable, led to a profound distrust in American politics and government. And that distrust manifested in the fresh hell that is waking up every new day of 2025. But you know what? We're getting ahead of ourselves. To really understand the '08 collapse, we need to hop back in that flux capacitor, and this time, we're going way back. Whoa! 1944. Wait a second. Elon, what are you doing here? You see, 1944 was the birth date of a doctrine known as neoliberalism. As I've researched this video on 2008, I've come to understand that what happened in '08 was really a direct result of this doctrine's emerging preeminence, both globally and here in the USA. And if you want to understand neoliberalism, you've got to get to know these guys, Friedrich Hayek and Milton Friedman. Now I know what you're thinking. Those guys are really hot, but they were just known for their good looks. Let's start with old Foxy Friedrich. In 1944, Friedrich published a book that would come to be known as the ideological bedrock of neoliberalism. The road to serfdom. The road to serfdom lays out some of the central tenets of neoliberalism, which include the almighty power of the free market. In Hayek's worldview, the free market is the only effective mechanism for distributing knowledge and resources. So-called intrusions on the free market, social welfare programs like healthcare and low-cost education, are coercive limits on liberty. Individualism. Hayek saw individualism as the cornerstone of freedom. He argues that societies function best when individuals are left to pursue their own interests. He recast the citizen as the consumer and interpreted freedom as the freedom to buy or sell. Competition and greed maintain social order. Noam Chomsky said it best. The best factors at predicting success in late-stage capitalism are a combination of greed, cynicism, obsequiousness, and subordination, lack of curiosity and independence of mind, and self-serving disregard for others. I like to think of neoliberalism as capitalism on steroids. It catalyzes profit-generating capital owners, leaving the rest of us with nothing but vague promises that wealth will trickle down from our buffed-up billionaires. Now, it's important to understand that Hayek's new philosophy was not initially popular. In fact, it represented a divergence from the dominant economic model of the early 20th century, Keynesian economics, which viewed government intervention, especially through fiscal policy, spending, and taxation, as necessary to stabilize the economy, boost demand, and reduce unemployment during downturns. But that's where Milton Friedman comes in. Friedman can be thought of as Hayek's most dutiful disciple. He also sort of functioned as his PR man, with a penchant for translating some of Hayek's more complex and academic concepts into short, accessible sound bites. If you've ever heard the term invisible hand of the market, Friedman coined that, and he and others set about the task of injecting Hayek's economic ideas around deregulation, privatization, and financialization into think tanks, universities, and governments around the globe. I bet you can guess which country loved his ideas. Reagan is often thought of as sort of the intellectual godfather of American neoliberalism. And while I'm not prepared to give that guy credit as intellectual anything, it is true that his administration implemented a no-holds-barred blitz of Hayek-Friedman policy. Simultaneously, Reagan's reign coincided with a rapid rise in economic inequality, heretofore unseen in our nation's history. Check out this chart showing the relative wealth share of the top 1% versus the bottom 50%. Reagan gets elected in 1981, the wealth of the 1% spikes, and it's been rising ever since. Turns out the invisible hand of the market has a sneaky tendency to reach into the pockets of the working class. Now, it would be untrue to categorize conservatives as the only administrators of the neoliberal agenda. One of the most important victories for the neoliberal order came under Bill Clinton's administration, and it just so happens to be one of particular importance in our quest for understanding what happened in 2008. The repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act. See, Glass-Steagall codified a fairly common sense notion. Basically, the money for bread isn't supposed to be spent at the casino. In 1933, the Glass-Steagall Act was passed as a direct response to the Great Depression. It was designed to separate commercial banking from investment banking to prevent conflicts of interest. It enacted three basic principles. Commercial banks, where people deposit money, were not allowed to engage in risky investment activities. Investment banks, which trade securities and engage in speculative investments, were not allowed to take deposits from regular customers. Banks could not merge into financial giants that did both. This law kept banks from using customers' savings for high-risk investments, reducing to the chance of another Great Depression. The Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, signed into law by President Bill Clinton, repealed Glass-Steagall, removing the barrier between commercial banks and investment banks. This allowed megabanks like Citigroup, JP Chase, and Bank of America to form, merging traditional banking with speculative trading. It doesn't take an economics PhD to figure out why merging commercial and investment banking is a bad idea. It's kind of like hearing your little niece's dance recital is going to be held at Danny's Gentlemen's Club. Like, yeah, I guess it's sort of the same activity, but those should probably be held at two different locations, right? I guess they gotta rent it out during the day, though. But whatever. Just add it to the list of things that really shouldn't be together, but all too often are. Church and state, the combination Pizza Hut and Taco Bell, and Matt Gaetz and 16-year-olds. The repercussions of these mega banks merging are still seen constantly today. At the time of recording this video, just yesterday, Bank of America, who provides financial services for 69 million US consumers and small businesses, was hit by a massive data breach. This breach happened all the way back in December, and the customers of B of A didn't hear about it until yesterday. And last year, Citigroup and JP Morgan both announced breaches too, months after the fact. Your bank could be breached right now, and it might take you 9 months to hear about it. You really want to give criminals that much of a head start to get access to your personal information? I don't think so. That's why we should talk about today's sponsor, Aura. Aura keeps an eye on my personal data, including my social security number, scanning billions of sources like the dark web and public court records to alert me to potential identity theft. They also provide up to $5 million in identity theft insurance, because if some scammer tries to ruin your life, at least your wallet won't take a hit. But Aura isn't just an ID babysitter. They come packed with a VPN boasting over 100 virtual locations, a secure password manager, antivirus protection, and even tools to keep shady websites at bay. Oh, and also, they'll stop data brokers from selling your personal information when these huge mega banks inevitably fumble again. In its official statement, Bank of America advised potential victims of the data breach to reach out to their state attorney general for guidance on preventing identity theft. Wow, thanks a lot, B of A. That's super helpful. While calling your state's attorney general's office sounds like a lot of fun, I'd rather just let Aura do the heavy lifting. You can go to my link, aura.com/Benaminute, to try 14 days for free. That will be enough time for Aura to find out if any of your personal data is exposed. And thank you to Aura for sponsoring this video. Alright, enough with this Cold War era crap. Let's hop back in the time machine and go back to 2008.
Those on Wall Street cannot resume taking risks without regard for consequences.
It was the worst day on Wall Street since the crash of 1987.
We're down 9% today. The Xetra DAX over in Frankfurt is down by 9%. The Paris market down by 9%.
By now, the story of the '08 crisis has been artfully rendered in movies like The Big Short and Margin Call, books like The Return of Depression Economics and Panic, as well as by countless newspaper articles, podcasts, magazine write-ups, and your drunk Uncle Dave at Thanksgiving when somebody makes the mistake of bringing up Obama. Some of these sources are better than others, so here's a quick recap for those who have only heard your Uncle Dave's version. For decades, the American housing market was seen as rock solid. Prices always went up, banks made safe loans, and people paid their mortgages. It was so stable, in fact, that the mega banks had a bright idea. What if we pulled all these mortgages together and then sold them as a bond? They were called mortgage-backed securities. And what's important to understand about these securities is that they were extremely lucrative. Investors loved these things. So much, in fact, that they needed to sell more. Banks realized that they can make way more money by lending to riskier borrowers with bad credit. A regular mortgage was boring. A 30-year fixed rate, responsible borrowers. A subprime mortgage? Oh, baby, now we're talking. Higher interest rates and more profits. But how do you get more subprime borrowers? It's simple. Lower your standards. No proof of income? No problem. No down payment? No problem. Credit scores in the toilet? Here's your loan. Here's the thing about bad loans. Eventually, people stopped paying them back. Subprime borrowers started defaulting in 2006 and 2007. Foreclosures skyrocketed, flooding the market with homes. Home prices started falling fast. Banks had billions of dollars in bad mortgage securities, and suddenly, nobody wanted to buy them. Cue the panic.
Zero, triple Bs. And then that happens.
What is that?
That's America's housing market.
So that's the story. And by now, you've probably heard it for the millionth time. But something else was happening around this time that's worth paying attention to. Americans were starting to lose their trust in America. Let's take a look. Yikes. Check out that drop from the turn of the century to around '08. I haven't seen a fall off that steep since Kanye on InfoWars. So what was happening to cause this drop? Well, for one thing, our government had utilized imaginary, non-existent weapons of mass destruction as justification for entangling us in a financially crippling and ethically dubious war halfway across the world. The ramifications of which include millions of civilian deaths, over $2.4 trillion in US resources, and a power vacuum which created the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria.
I call upon all nations to do everything they can to stop these terrorist killers. Thank you. Now watch this drive.
But you know what? That's a story for another day. Because another factor, one more crucial to our story, is that in 2008, Americans were scared. Millions of people who had spent most of their lives in relative financial comfort suddenly faced the prospect of losing their job or their home. Americans were fed up with the neoliberal status quo. People wanted change. People wanted Obama. And the first thing on Obama's hope and change checklist was what to do with these big fat banks. You've probably heard the phrase too big to fail. And to be fair, there is some legitimacy behind that idea. Largely due to the ramifications of the repeal of Glass-Steagall, banks ballooned in size during the 90s and early 2000s. Many were so interconnected and embedded in the American economy that a full collapse could have been catastrophic for everyday Americans. So as we all know, we, the taxpayers, bailed them out. One of the first actions Obama took was to administer a program known as TARP, the Troubled Asset Relief Program. TARP was a program that used taxpayer money to buy assets and equity from financial institutions after the collapse. Picture this. You've got this crowd of bank execs milling about, all sheepish grins and shrugged shoulders because their multi-billion-dollar bet on the housing industry has gone belly up. Now what we should have done is rounded up all these slack-jawed mouth breathers and had them fight to the death, Hunger Games style. But instead what we did is dropped a Hunger Games style $700 billion care package right into the crowd. That care package was TARP, 100% funded by American taxpayers. Now at this point you might be thinking, how did these banks do this? How did they manage to market these dog shit mortgage-backed securities like they were risk-free mutual funds? A huge part of that answer is that they had insurance. And almost all of that insurance was provided by one single company, AIG. AIGFP sold massive amounts of credit default swaps, a type of insurance policy for the mortgage-backed securities, and collateralized debt obligations that banks were selling like hotcakes. And the banks loved these swaps because they let them claim that their risky investments were insured, making them feel safer. AIG raked in huge profits without setting aside enough cash to cover potential losses because they assumed that home prices would never crash, which of course, they did. So now AIG needs to be bailed out too, because just like the banks, these boys have become too big to fail. Enter TARP to the rescue, once again. But then AIG did the unthinkable. Something so egregious that it even boggled my deeply cynical mind. They took the taxpayer TARP bailout, and you know what the very first thing they fucking did with it was? Paid all of their executives bonuses. In March 2009, AIG announced that they were going to pay out hundreds of millions in executive bonuses using the recently distributed TARP money from the Obama Treasury Department. Truly evil shit. At first, the announcement was met with outrage from both sides of the aisle. Here's how Chuck Grassley, a Republican senator, responded to the announcement.
I would suggest the first thing that would make me feel a little bit better towards them is if they'd follow the Japanese example and come before the American people and take the deep bow and say, I'm sorry. And then either do one of two things, resign or go commit suicide.
The Obama administration vowed to put a stop to this. His initial statement from March of 2009. This is a corporation that finds itself in financial distress due to recklessness and greed. How do they justify this outrage? Wall Street argued that the bonuses were embedded in contracts signed prior to the bailout, and that failure to honor these contracts would be illegal. Congress tried to pass a 90% tax on AIG bonuses to claw back the money, but the bill died in the Senate after intense lobbying from Wall Street. Ultimately, only a fraction of the bonuses were returned voluntarily. This was truly beyond the pale. Surely someone in American leadership was going to step up and put a stop to this. But nobody ever did. Obama had campaigned on hope and change, but the banks and the insurance industry ended up conducting business as usual. So if we're gonna help the big boys on Wall Street, surely the rest of us on Main Street should get a little support too, right? Well, in 2008, one way to help the average American would have been to legalize a process called cram down. And no, it's not just what Chris Christie does when he sees a family-sized bag of M&Ms. Cram down is basically a legal process in bankruptcy courts where a judge can reduce the principal balance of a loan, effectively forcing the lenders to accept lower payments from borrowers. While cram down was already available for certain types of loans, like commercial real estate and car loans, it was not extended to primary residence mortgages, largely due to opposition from, you guessed it, banks. Chris Christie? Had the Obama administration successfully extended cram down to residential mortgages, it would have significantly improved the recovery for struggling homeowners. Not only would it have massively reduced the foreclosures, but it would have shifted the burden of the crisis from the American taxpayer, who funded government bailout programs like TARP, onto the banks. forcing them to absorb some of the financial losses from their own irresponsible lending practices. But of course, it didn't happen. While the Obama administration initially supported cram-down legislation, it failed in the Democratic-controlled Senate after heavy lobbying from the banks and the financial industry. So that's it. That's the story of 2008. The banks got bailed out, the executives got bonuses, and everyday Americans got bent over. Okay, time to head back to the present. Oh, no, don't stall out on me, you piece of shit. We're not home. I knew I shouldn't have bought the Tesla charger for the flux capacitor. God, where are we? Oh, no. No, please. No, not again.
It is amazing how you can delete 33,000 emails.
Welcome back to 2016, guys.
Donald Trump has won the state of Wisconsin, which means he is the winner of this race and will return to the White House.
Fight for a great future for Germany. Fight for a great future for Germany. Go. Convince your friends, convince everyone. Let's go.
Now, I want to be fair. In this video, I've been largely critical of the Obama administration and their response to the 2008 financial crisis. But his administration did oversee some incremental but important reforms as well. The passage of Dodd-Frank instituted some common sense banking regulations, and the Affordable Care Act cut the number of uninsured Americans in half. This had the effect of reducing inequality. In 2015, the final year of Obama's presidency, low-wage workers actually rose at a rate above their high and medium wage counterparts. For the first time in decades, the invisible hand of the market had been swatted back by the pockets of the American workers, even if it was just a little slap on the wrist. But then Wall Street had an idea. Something so crazy, it just might work. Perhaps if the invisible hand is losing its pickpocketing touch, it could instead
grab him by the foot.
That's right. Trump descended down his golden escalator and shifted the paradigm of American politics for good. But how did he do it? How did a reality TV star who had already run for president 2 times before as a laughingstock become the Republican frontrunner in a matter of months? Well, to understand that, I think we need to take a look back at the chart that I showed you earlier. But this time, let's focus on the period between 2008 and 2015, when Trump announced his run. Notice anything? That line is flatter than a Jeb Bush joke at a campaign rally.
Please clap.
You see, despite the modest policy successes under Obama that I listed, the American public never regained its trust in government after 2008. Obama had campaigned and won on a message of disruption and change, but he had governed as part of the establishment. Americans still wanted their outsider. Now, I know what a lot of you are thinking. Ben, Trump isn't an outsider. He's an elite. He lives on a golf course and flies on the Epstein jet. But in the context of the 2016 Republican Party, it is absolutely true that Trump was an outsider. Don't believe me? Let's take a little trip down memory lane of what he and his Republican colleagues said about each other back then.
You all have friends. You all have friends that are thinking about voting for Donald Trump. Friends, do not let friends vote for con artists.
Donald, you're a sniveling coward, and leave Heidi the hell alone.
First of all, Rand Paul shouldn't even be on this stage. He's number 11. He's got 1% in the polls, and how he got up here, there's far too many people.
Trump was absolutely a disruptor in the Republican Party. It's weird. In a lot of ways, Trump won by singing the same song as Obama. Sure, he changed the lyrics and made him a little more racist.
They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
Okay, a lot more racist, but the melody, the feeling, that was the same. Think about it.
Under my administration, we're fighting against the lobbyists, the special interests, and the corrupt Washington politics.
Or what about?
The forgotten man and the forgotten woman. Well, you're not forgotten anymore, that I can tell you.
This sort of rhetoric tapped into the same part of the American psyche that Obama activated. The disaffected and the disenchanted felt like they had a voice. And when he faced off against the most entrenched establishment politician of the 21st century, the literal embodiment of politics as usual, you can almost understand how people fell for his grift.
What year was America great?
When it was founded.
Except for the slavery stuff.
Except for the slavery stuff, you know?
Ooh. Or maybe people are just dumbasses. All right, that's enough 2016 for today. Well, we're back. We're in the year 2025. And if you're like me, this year hasn't felt like a great one to live in. Every day we wake up and read stories about how people are losing access to their healthcare, or about how we're relinquishing our commitment to helping the planet, or about how our president is planning to build a luxury resort on the rubble of a society that we helped bomb into oblivion. I wanted to make this video because I wanted to understand how we got here. It's sort of like that Kamala quote.
You think you just fell out of a coconut tree? You exist in the context of all in which you live and what came before you.
Sort of stupid, but also sort of poignant. I think it's important to understand that we didn't just wake up one day with Trump and MAGA and all of these problems. We are where we are in 2025 for a whole host of reasons. And what happened in 2008 is just one piece of the puzzle. If you're like me, most days I'm pretty pessimistic about our future, and really the only thing that I've found that helps combat this doomer outlook is attempting to put together the pieces of what brought us here. I think it helps to go back and look at how 2008 led to 2025, because it's a reminder that things weren't always like this, and that means that things don't have to be like this moving forward. If we can understand how our past shaped our present, then I think we have a chance at shaping a future that's a little bit brighter. Which is why I'll be making more videos that are focused on trying to make sense of how we got here. I'm considering making this into a new series on my channel. So if you enjoyed this video and want to follow me on this journey, you can let me know by liking this video and subscribing to my channel. Also, let me know if you guys have any topics that might fit well into this series. I'd love to hear what y'all think too. For the research put into this video, I wanted to give a huge shout out to David Serrata's podcast series, The Meltdown, and also The Invisible Doctrine by George Monbiot and Peter Hutchison, which was actually recommended to me by one of y'all. I highly recommend checking both out if you want to dive deeper into the topics discussed in today's video. Anyway, it's been a minute, and thank you so much for watching.